So listen, I'm sure you know that Oregon is the most exciting wine region in the United States, but I'll bet you didn't know that you can easily become an owner of one of Oregon's leading wineries, Willamette Valley Vineyards. That's right. Willamette Valley Vineyards is a publicly traded stock, and you can buy a piece of it. Check it out. It's on NASDAQ at WVVIP. Preferred stock is offered at $5.15 per share with a 4.27% annual dividend. As an owner, you'll receive a 25% discount on wine, an annual wine credit, and other fantastic benefits. That's so cool. Learn more at WVV.com. That's WVV as in Willamette Valley Vineyards.com. Or call the winery at 503-588-9463. Thanks so much, Willamette Valley Vineyards. And now it's time for the show.
I've got one for you, by the way, if you want to use this. You know, according to chemistry, alcohol is a solution. So...
I think there's some like Kickstarter t-shirt in that, Laura.
Hello and welcome to The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in the wine and food world. I am your host, Catherine Cole, and I am joined by co-host Martin Reyes, a master of wine, international wine consultant, winemaker, importer, and educator. Hello, Martin.
Saludos, Catherine. ¿Cómo estás?
Bien, gracias.
Right on. I'm looking forward to this podcast episode very much so, because we've got two experts here that they're going to discuss the unseen emotional toll that people in the beverage industry can face, and ways that we can all improve our mental health. I'm excited for this one.
Me too. And I'm excited to introduce our panelists. We have Laura Louise Green, founder of Healthy Pour, an organization advocating for mental health and wellness initiatives in the beverage and food industry. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. And returning to the foretop, we have Rebecca Hopkins, founder of A Balanced Glass and VP of Communications and partner at Folio Fine Wine Partners. Rebecca, we haven't seen you since episode 51, so it's so nice to have you back.
It's wonderful to be back, and thank you, Catherine, for the opportunity. And Martine, it's great to finally meet you. I've been following you for a long time, so I'm super excited to be with you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Looking forward to it.
All right, well, let's just dig in. Let's start off this discussion by letting our listeners in on a little secret. Working in the beverage industry is not always what it's cracked up to be. Martine, I'm sure you've had the experience I've often had in which you're at a cocktail party or some sort of function and someone asks you what you do and you tell them and they get all excited and they say, wow, that sounds so fun. And it isn't exactly. And I bet even you, a master of wine, who's kind of at the top of the wine pinnacle in terms of where your career is, I bet you've often thought to yourself, it's supposed to be so fun to work in this world, so why am I so exhausted and miserable? Have you had that thought?
Yeah, I have different variations of that thought that come through. What is often a blind spot for people outside the industry is that it's really difficult for us to leave our job because it is daytime or evening, whenever you work, right? It is there for us the entire time, either as a beverage that is consumable, tasteable, and some level of analytics, or if you're judging it or whatever it is, you're writing about it, and then you finish your work and then you go to somewhere where what is there? More wine, right? But for the people outside the track, I call them civilians, where a civilian says, hey, wow, let's talk about that. And sometimes you could be tired of talking about it or drinking it or tasting it. Or B, we forget that it is an intoxicant. And I forget that sometimes too, that, it's not something that's automatically accepted by our body. And the conversations and the focus and that intensity around it can make me feel exhausted or miserable on different levels. I don't want to sometimes talk about it, or we work late hours into the evening. Some hospitality professionals, right, who do work in restaurants are finishing up at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning.
Laura, you've done a lot of research into this. What are the stresses that folks in the beverage industry and the hospitality industry are dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
Oh my, yeah. Well, with the survey that I released a, a survey at the beginning of COVID-19 when all the shutdowns were happening to the hospitality industry and drinks industry to gauge their stress levels, understand the level of burnout and substance use and how they correlated. And people reported that most reported that financial stress actually was the big one that was very scary for them. I mean, on top of it, though, there's a lot of stress. It's there's a lot of stress within this work for sure, especially people who are in hospitality and are guest facing. But I think what happens is the stress compounds and compounds and compounds because when people are like on stage all the time or have to pretend that the job is always awesome, we aren't adequately coping with that stress. So when we don't adequately cope with the stress in an adaptive way, then it just compiles more and more. And then usually we turn to different coping strategies and mechanisms that are easily accessible to us, like substances, like wine, like spirits, cocktails.
Or the food, right? Sometimes right, the desserts and the decadence and all that stuff that then you just get gorged over, right? Or you eat too much, or I would imagine that's also true, right?
Oh, certainly. It's because it's all tied up into the same little bow of, put on a smiling face. I have the best job in the world. Be happy. It's it's a form of escapism.
Yeah, Laura, adding to that, I think it's also that, Martine, back to what you're saying, is it's the frequency and the volume
Mm-hmm.
of the level of consumption, whether that's food, alcohol, travel. I mean, whether you're doing the steakhouse tour across the US, if you're traveling and doing education, or you're consuming late in the evening, tasting's over, but you're having that final drink. We as an industry that's our community. It may be where we can finally unwind and debrief with our own friends or colleagues. But that consistent, Laura, to your point, that need to be on, that constantly being happy and energetic and really entertaining people is definitely something that it's difficult to find that space to slow down and to get some self-care.
Rebecca, as I'm listening to you right now, I think that for the audience that there's a little bit of irony in this because there are plenty of jobs out there that don't have the pluses of our trade that are also stressful, that are also people who have to be on. And so I recognize that on one hand, the irony is that I'm comfortable saying, yes, I do love my career. I think we all do. We are grateful that we have a career in wine and beverage or spirits, in that source. And along with that, the restaurants and the food that come along with that, the level of decadence. But I think, so I want to acknowledge that and be cognizant that for the listener, yeah, it is an enjoyable career. But then also that something else is enjoyable is a roller coaster ride. Once, twice, maybe five times, right? And if you're always on the roller coaster, eventually people can relate to that. We're like, wow, if you're always on the roller coaster, uh, that might get a little tiring and eventually a little dizzy and eventually exhausting and eventually torturous. So I just wanted to sort of give that frame of reference to acknowledge the attractiveness of our career, but also it's always like that the roller coaster eventually chafes.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, Martine, you bring up such a good point. I mean, all of this is so great, but I'm reflecting on my time when I was traveling with a distributor of fine wine and spirits. And, I would be on a 6 a.m. flight and I would work on that flight and I would land and I would already have emails from New York or wherever. And then I would spend all day in and out of counts, visiting reps, talking to buyers, staff training, and then maybe would have a dinner that night, meeting with the sales team. And then, and it would go into the evening, but then I would be up again the next morning answering emails and, starting my day, visiting accounts again. And it's hard to differentiate that the fun and the pleasure and the enjoyment that comes from working in this industry from work. And when we don't have that space to really separate and healthily compartmentalize our time, it can be very, very taxing. And some people get energy from that constant, that roller coaster that you talk about, that sort of extroversion, being around people and gaining energy from it. But a lot of us don't. Let's get that. And so those are very, very long days. And in time that we think that we're decompressing, we're actually not, because we're still on.
You all just made me think of, this has happened a few times in my career, getting off a plane, coming from the West Coast to Europe. Everyone says, oh, you must get to travel to Europe all the time. That must be so fun. And I'm thinking, okay, I get off a plane. I haven't had any sleep. I've been on a plane for 15 hours or whatever it is. And inevitably you have to go to the 9 a.m. tasting. And no matter how much you love wine, you do not want to go a night without sleep and then have to taste it completely exhausted. And it's like, how do you explain that to someone else who is just so jealous of your career?
Yeah, I think, Catherine, you raise a really great point, because what often happens at the other end of that journey is someone welcoming you with all of their hospitality in every way that can show up, whether that is the person who greets you at the airport, or the winery that you're going to visit, or the judge, the show judging you're going to do. And as people in the industry, I think, who have a level of knowledge and understanding of the work that goes into, the creation of wine or of entertainment or hospitality, you want to be respectful of that and really be engaged. And we're curious, naturally curious to learn. And so it becomes that, what do you give up in order to, just kind of stay within that hospitable guest, but look after your own self-care while doing your job in a lot of instances. It's a juggling act. It really is. And I think a lot of people learn by getting it wrong. A lot of us, I've certainly learned by not doing it well. And so navigating that midpoint is often a lot of lessons in, the hard ones about, not going to do that again.
A lot of self-regulation. And, we've been talking also about the people in hospitality, many people who do what I do, who are journalists, we don't have healthcare. We don't have mental health care. We have to kind of find our own ways to deal with some of these issues on our own. And as has been mentioned in this conversation, people self-medicate with even more alcohol because that's easy. It's nearby. It's close to hand.
Yeah, when the self-medication is a portion of your work, there's very little separation of yourself. And then when you bring it up, as we are right now, for wine and beverage professionals, we can relate to it. But then I still feel, I still recognize the outside perspective of, like, you guys quit complaining, So I recognize how difficult it is for the outside perspective to engage in a hey, give that person the space or whatever, the way that perhaps other professions or careers may elicit. And I think it's fair to accept that there is that gap of in and out, and I'm okay with that.
So, Laura, do you happen to know, do people in hospitality and in beverage have more issues with mental health than those in other professions? Do you have a breakdown of that between industries?
I have theories. So I think that there are a lot of industries that are very troubled in a lot of different ways. Like, I think of how a lot of hospitality professionals in particular are in a high risk position, largely because, like you mentioned, there's not a lot of health insurance. There's varying levels of socioeconomic status, just a lot of different problems, people being underpaid, long hours, exploitation, that's all there. But what I see a lot of in hospitality is this sort of chaotic, codependent need and structure of validating our, getting our self-worth validation externally based on how much we can give to someone or to something. I go back and forth, to be very honest, of wondering whether or not people are drawn to this work because there's existing issues, or if they're developing the issues because of this work, or if there's a combination of those two things. And I think it's too complex and too individualized to speak generally to it. But that's also the work that individuals within this industry have to do to figure out, like, am I staying in this industry because it allows me to behave a certain way without consequence? Or is this industry exacerbating issues that I'm already experiencing and I can't address them while staying here? Like, those are the tough questions that a lot of people, I think, are afraid to ask themselves, but it's necessary to.
Laura, you transition this conversation into a very important related issue, and that is feelings of self-worth, right? And you have a graduate degree in mental health counseling, and you've conducted research on the mental health challenges faced by beverage industry workers, hospitality, spirits, wine, etc. And could you tell us about some of the ways in which working in this industry can warp our sense of self-worth?
Yeah, well, I mean, an obvious way to talk about it is the relationship between the hospitality professional and the guest. That's a really troubling relationship. It's a troubling power dynamic, largely because of tipping structures. That not only is someone's well-being and like financial well-being and the ability to pay rent, support their families themselves, it's in the hands of someone else, but that person is also measuring the job that they did based on kind of a whim. So that's a problem. And our brains aren't saying to us, okay, I'm at work now. Okay, I'm at home now. Every interaction that we have with somebody, is impermeating into our brains, and then it is recycled into our behavior and our thoughts and the feelings that come with that. So if we spend 8, 10, 12 hours, 4 to 5 times a week, just turning off our emotional life and accepting, the guest is always right, anything for the guest. Think about how that starts to affect people when they're not at work. Those patterns of thinking, those patterns of behavior. It's a problem. And if we look at not just front of house or drinks industry, but look at back of house and how it's so entrenched in the brigade system, this dehumanizing factor, people stop caring for themselves because, frankly, they're actively told not to. So it has a huge impact on our worth. And so many of us, I came from on-premise, from the restaurant and bar industry, and then moved into distribution. And I can say confidently that what I've experienced in the on-premise has carried over for many of us who work in supplier, wineries, distilleries, have moved more into that, distribution or sales sector of the work that we do. And so then it starts to permeate everywhere.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, kind of a related issue, getting back to the beginning of the episode. Not only do people question whether people who work in the wine industry, the beverage industry, could possibly have a difficult job, people also question whether we actually have a career. Is that really, do people really do that for work? And I mean, I don't speak often about my personal life on this podcast, but I was married for 20 years to someone who told everyone, and continues to tell my children, that I have an imaginary job. It's a fake job. And everyone just, nod and smile when Catherine says she has to work because we all know she's not working. And it's like, why? I guess because it's the wine industry and that doesn't count as a real job. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure, there's so many people in hospitality who can't just say, yeah, I am a waitress. That's what I do. That's my career. I think people often say, yeah, but so what's your day job, or what career are you working toward? People don't expect people to just want to do this as their life's work.
I'm sure you can relate. Both guests can relate to that. I talk to Catherine often, and she's working long ass hours all the time and is exhausted. And just to hear that from me kind of gets me a little, because I see that, right? I mean, Rebecca, I'm sure you've got a thought on this too. I bet.
Yeah, Martine, it's I came up through the production side of the industry in Australia, and I think certainly we're a country of drinking culture, rightly or wrongly. That's a lot of what we're known for. And in the industry, I mean, it's a very physical industry as well in terms of the demands of harvest or working in a production environment, which is ultimately, you're in industry, you're in heavy machinery, and long hours, particularly at certain times of the year, and that sense of identification or even self-selection of community just happens because you are in this environment where you're in it together. Harvest is hard work. You are working very long hours. It's physical labor. And your breaks, or you're on night shift, you're surrounding yourself with your own community. And if that is a community that is not supportive for your greater health and well-being, or not observant or a safe space to be able to, maybe look at issues that are not issues that are often discussed outside of your career, it's difficult. And then we look at the kind of glorification of the winemaker, as in the winemaker is the person with the real job. But what about the viticulturalists? What about the operations team? What about the cellar teams? What about the bottling line? What about all those other areas that are working in our industry that are less visible, and in this state of not receiving the same care from the industry as other sectors? So it's really complex at that end as well. And like Laura was talking about in the hospitality piece, of course, it's that is definitely it's encouraging to see the mental health discussion really starting to happen. But growing up, I started at Adelaide University at 17 years old studying wine, and no one was helping me understand alcohol or wine, beyond sensory evaluation, viticulture, winemaking. So it's that self-taught side as well. And that's that self-worth of being associated with either prestige wine producers or well-known wine regions, or being, in that group. So yeah, you can come unstuck for sure.
Rebecca, as you were talking about harvest, it had me thinking so much about how there are so many areas within this massive, massive industry that are so invisible. And, I'm thinking back on, years that I was a craft bartender, designing cocktail menus, and how even when I was in graduate school, when I went back to graduate school and I would have bar guests ask, like, oh, you seem so smart. Are you in school? And I resented saying yes, because it further confirmed this narrative of this being a transient position, just something to do in the meantime, or, oh, you couldn't do this, these 5 key doctor, lawyer, teacher, whatever. That was a very frustrating thing for me. And, honestly brought a lot of anger and brought a lot of, identity issues, I would say. Because when you have an entire society telling you your work that you're passionate about and love isn't valid, we want to take from you and we want to feel good because of the experience you're creating, but you as a person are less than. Like, that sucks. That's a horrible thing to feel. And, you know, even when after I got my degree and, you know, my master's and my license, I still had people being like, I can't believe you stayed in this industry, as if the work were less than. You know, it's
so true. So true.
But it is. And it's very, very frustrating. And this perception that like, oh, you're in this for the party. It must just be a constant party, or, you know, Laura drinks for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it seems like it, but really no, you know,
we drink intelligence.
There's so many other skills. Yeah. You know, and I think you all, and certainly people listening to this, can identify with that sort of like late night hotel bar, that lonely line of like individual people who are consultants or traveling or sales or whatever, and everyone starts comparing their jobs. And I always had the coolest job at the bar. I'm a spirit specialist. I am expert in mezcal, whiskey, blah, 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 blah. And it was always about, oh, wow, that's such a cool job. I want that job. And it would be very frustrating. And I would usually, like a glass of wine or two in, go on this rant about like, there's so much studying that went into this. There was so much work, like years, decades of experience went into this job. You know, what can we do for ourselves to combat or balance that is to think about our identities as whole people, as entire human beings, and start to pull our entire identities out of the industry that we work for. You know, and that's hard because our friends are industry, our hobbies are the work that we do a lot of the times. Like, start thinking to yourself, okay, what other identities do I hold? Right? So for me, I can say, okay, spirit specialist, you know, whiskey aficionado or whatever, counselor, consultant, but also friend, daughter, musician, partner, you know, so many other identities that we hold in our lives, and doing some work to spread yourself and diversify amongst that, so that if there is a issue where a family member is like, oh, you just party for a living, it doesn't start to tear down your entire self-worth.
Oh, I love that, Laura.
I mean, that's just that's just the beginning of it. Even if we look at like how we lead, we kind of start inserting what we've learned from other people into our identities that comes out in our leadership practices. Like, the more we can embrace our whole selves, like flaws and all, you know, that's another thing. We don't like to show our flaws. We don't like to show our humility. Maybe the things that we don't know within this work. And the more we can embrace that, one, the better we're serving this community and the better we're serving ourselves.
Well, it is time to take a little break and taste some wine from our fantastic sponsor. I've got Rachel here, and we have cracked open a bottle of the 2019 Grand Moraine Yamhill Carlton Oregon Pinot Noir. I'm excited for this wine because I'm a big fan of cool vintages, and 2019 was notable in that it was the coolest harvest season in the Willamette Valley since 2007, and 2007 is an underdog cool vintage that I still adore to this day, so I'm super excited for this wine. Let's give it a try, Rachel. Let me know what you think.
I really like this. I am also a big fan of cooler vintage Pinot Noir. I think this has this kind of like sharp, like bright red raspberry thing, which I really love, and also like kind of more savory notes, like that kind of raspberry leaf, maybe some spice in there. I love this.
Me too. It's earthy, it's delicious, and it definitely reflects that Yamhill Carlton AVA. It was aged 9 months in 39% new French oak, and winemaker Shane Moore vinified 25% of the fruit as whole clusters, which builds in some nice spice and structure into that wine. It was crafted from fruit grown on estate vineyards on the wild western edge of the Yamhill Carlton appellation. Both of the estate vineyards contain some of the oldest marine sedimentary soils in the greater Willamette Valley. But don't take our word for it about this beautiful wine. Check out the gorgeous Grand Moraine Winery next time you're in the area. It's located in the heart of the Willamette Valley in the town of Yamhill. Make an appointment to visit the next time you're in the Portland area. Or have a Grand Moraine delivered right to your home with free shipping. You can use the promo code FOURTOP to get that. That's FOURTOP. Go to granmoraine.com. That's GRAN, Gran Moraine, MORAINE. To purchase your wine online, enter the promo code FOURTOP and you get that shipping on the house. Thanks so much, Grand Moraine. Well, let's end this conversation on a positive, productive note and discuss some ways that people are making positive changes in their lives while continuing to work in beverage. Rebecca, your work at A Balanced Glass focuses on how to achieve wellness while working in an industry that's, let's face it, it's unhealthy in a variety of ways. One factor, actually, I'm interested in, having read quite a bit about your work, is how to find balance with alcohol itself. And I'm really intrigued by this concept that comes up, mindful drinking. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, Catherine. Mindful drinking, I think 5 years ago, was just called moderation, self-awareness. And, it really comes down to a notion of it's what's being it's coming out in the lexicon of culture. But if we step back and think about mindful anything, mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful meditation, of course, is the obvious one. It really comes back to having a moment by moment awareness of our thoughts, of our feelings, of our sensations, of our environment, of our response to that environment, and being very hyper aware. Which to me then allows us to make space to really step back and reflect on, okay, where am I at this point, and how am I feeling, and sometimes how did I get here? The irony with mindful drinking, back to Martine's point, is by nature, the more drinking you do, you lose that ability to be mindful and to be present. And that roller coaster is very much alive and well. And so mindful drinking is, to me, a way of finding that space to stop and get really clear about why are we drinking, and understand, okay, how do I best look after myself at that time? But that's really hard, right? Because we have to get really honest and we have to be vulnerable enough to look in the dark places. And certainly, again, we all spend our careers in these places that are seen to be, glamorous and indulgent and enjoyable. And so having that dark space is not always okay. And Laura, you and I have talked about this in many discussions we've had about that bringing your whole self. Sometimes people don't want to see that whole self. Because what they perceive is whether that is being portrayed through social media or through, a small glimpse into your life through an event or some form of hospitality. And so, mindful drinking is moderation, really, or self-awareness is really taking a look at, okay, what are our triggers? Are we tasting for professional reasons? Are we drinking for leisure? Are we drinking for pleasure? All of those are okay. It's just, again, looking at, okay, well, why are we doing that? Something I think that we're great at as an industry, but maybe we need to be better at is looking out for our colleagues and friends and saying, are they okay? Being mindful around our community. How are we showing up for each other? Whether, to Laura's point, is it a friend, as a partner, as a just a trusted ear that someone can share kind of their innermost thoughts or their fears. I think we have a lot of us have anxiety and fear that comes up, and knowing where we can put that and doing it in a mindful way where you're obviously listening, but you're being present for what is, being shared. And then really being on the lookout for toxic behavior, of pressure around drinking, being in our community, keeping an eye on that behavior of others, or even habits that we may have, the staying to be the last one at the bar, or, maybe encouraging that next round of drinks. And also, I think being mindful of people who are not drinking, and really having that as a respected position, because it is, as industry professionals, we can choose. and, to reduce, abstain, manage, whatever it is for us that is in the best interest of our own health and well-being. I think there's definitely space for all of that. And that's something we really need to, I believe, as an industry, that's a lot of cultural shift through leadership as well as our own behavior.
What sounds really awesome about what you are doing with mindful drinking, Rebecca, is we all intuitively know people who've been around alcohol in any way, right? Is that it has a double-edged sword. That it has this beauty, and particularly for me, I'm obviously biased with wine, but spirits, cocktails, beer can be the same. There's a beauty and there's a grace of a touch of magic, right? That infuses any moment. You said something earlier about being vulnerable, and saying, I think that is part of the beauty around the wine, is that when we're vulnerable, we're able to see the person across from us, and then we connect, right, with that grace. But that the flip side of the vulnerability is potentially the toxicity of, if the intentions or if the power dynamic is shifted, right, where this vulnerability can be taken advantage of, or if you're not careful, you make poor decisions that then the next day are you regret all kinds of decisions, right? And so that mindful drinking to me is, you walk into that space recognizing all the possibilities, avoid all the problems and keep all the lovely solutions. I've got one for you, by the way, Rebecca and Laura, if you want to use this. According to chemistry, alcohol is a solution. So,
I think there's some Kickstarter T-shirt in that, Laura. You can throw that on your site. Get that on your site. Martine, as you were talking, I was visualizing, mindful drinking is often being your own best friend, and showing up for yourself in every decision that you're making, because there's only one chance to pull that cork, unless you're using Coravin, but you're pulling that cork, you're having that moment, you're sharing that experience, and sometimes you're sharing it with the person who created it. Which is, maybe not an experience you'll have too often. And having that sense of respect and honor and magic and ceremony and ritual, and bringing that into your overall kind of consumption of whatever it is that you're choosing to have.
Alcohol has so many, it's a relationship that we have with it, right? And that relationship, especially with the work that we do, is incredibly complex. For some people who don't work in this industry, it's something to help them relax, or to cope, or to, literally shut down, or to enjoy with a dinner, or to bring as a gift, or whatever. And we have all that for sure. But on top of it, we also have this deep, deep love and respect for it. It's also a source of our income. It's currency within our community and within our industry. Giving, someone sits down at the bar, you don't give shots and free drinks to people you hate, so it's a lot of that too. So there's so many different hats that it wears. And the mindful drinking piece of just taking a bit, because it's also intertwined with emotional intelligence, right? Just taking a beat and saying, okay, why am I drinking this right now? Is it to cope? And if it's to cope, that's cool. Just know that it's to cope so that you can regulate from there. Or is it to explore it with the winemaker? Or is it to savor the moment? Or is it to connect with someone? And really defining that piece is helpful, not only to help us manage what hat that relationship is wearing at that point, but to really take in the moments that are so, so special to us. Gosh, I'm remembering a moment that I got to shoot a shot of Malort with Jules Taylor, and I knew exactly what I was doing in that moment. It was to shoot a shot of Malort with Jules Taylor and never forget that ever again.
Hold on, Laura. Hold on, Laura. You have to explain to our listeners who Jules Taylor is.
Jules Taylor is a winemaker, New Zealand, right? Yes, New Zealand.
Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm the spirits person in this around this table, But I have a bottle of her Sauvignon Blanc in my refrigerator right now. And she was in town where I was working. We distributed her, and they were having this beautiful wine dinner down the street from where I lived. And I was like, I'm going to crash it. And so then I took her to my corner bar across the street, and I was like, I'm going to introduce you to Chicago, and bought her a shot of Malort and then tried to expense it.
Well, and doesn't Chicago famously have like this wonderful relationship with Malort, which is basically the weirdest tasting alcohol on the planet?
It's sublimely bitter, and it tastes like biting into a grapefruit pith, maybe 30 minutes after you brushed your teeth.
Yeah.
So it's...
That is so visceral.
But it's like a Chicago thing, right? I feel like Chicago people drink Malort. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And it's also like a way that we introduce people to the city. And it's something that, especially cocktail folks were very proud of. But like, if you examine that circumstance, like on one hand, I try to break up with shots, but that was a decision that I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to shoot Malort with Jules Taylor ever again.
But that was mindful drinking, because you...
Exactly right. Absolutely. Yeah. I wasn't like, I'm shooting this to get wasted. I was like, this is a very special moment. The poor woman.
I'm sure
she's
had
a Kiwi. She can tough it out. She's fine.
Yeah.
She's Jules Taylor. Stop it.
Oh, man. Anyway.
Well, Rebecca, I feel like I love what everyone's saying about having really intentional moments with alcohol. And I feel like I had kind of a paradigm shift moment when you were talking, because suddenly I was like replaying through however many years of history I've had in this 25 years of history in this industry, all the moments when I thought I felt uncomfortable. And I never thought to say to the person who was drinking too much, are you okay? It never would have occurred to me. I mean, more often than not, I would think, oh, I'm the uncool person because I can't stay out all night drinking. I've got to go to bed. And there's always this group, like if you're on some sort of a trip with colleagues, there's always the group that stays out all night drinking. And I always thought, oh, I'm lesser because I can't keep up with them. And now I'm looking back, I'm thinking, maybe I should have talked to them, some of them, and asked them if they're doing okay. It just never would have occurred to me. But
that's a great point.
At some point it stops being mindful, and it starts being just sort of this boulder that's rolling down the hill that maybe they just can't stop.
Exactly, Catherine, and coming back to some of what Laura was saying too, that's when we start to really delve into those mental health underlying issues that may be present, where alcohol is becoming that coping mechanism rather than that present mindful reason for consumption. And it's really difficult, though, to ask someone if they're okay, because it puts both a judgment on yourself, like who am I to be qualified to do that other than a human caring about a human, but also you're assuming that their behavior is somehow, compromised or not appropriate. And that's something that is Laura, I mean, you could speak to more about this, but in terms of taking that position of being that the bystander that's, clearly watching out for a dangerous behavior to kind of interject or to step in is a really vulnerable place. I don't know, Laura, what you think about that.
Yeah, that's a rough one, because on one hand, I'm reflecting on all the times that I wish someone had stopped me throughout my career, and also at the same time, I'm reflecting on all the times that I probably would have bit their head off. And we don't always know which way it's going to go.
Yeah, we can't tell. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Someone might respond with, yeah, you're right. Or someone might go even harder as a result.
Is there a way to ask?
I think so. I mean, I'm thinking of, gosh, something I've been promoting a lot, especially behind bars, like when bar teams do that team building shot together, is I'll be like, do a water bomb instead. How about everyone fills a glass of water and does a water bomb? Just gently maybe ordering some food or getting everybody a glass of water, not singling a single person out. Those are really good ways. But if it's an issue, like one of those that really needs to be addressed, not just in the moment or in the course of an evening, that's probably a conversation that should happen absolutely sober, at another time. But it is touchy, and it's very, it's also okay to ask for help from somebody, for guidance and coaching of how to approach a situation, or finding somebody who might be more suitable to have that conversation with them. But I think the gentlest way that we have right now until it becomes less sensitive is, get them a burger or a glass of water, something like that.
Or is it the question more systemic, where we as an industry can talk to the organizers of events and ask them during a moment of, okay, we're finishing up our sessions or our tastings, our conference, our summit, our tour, and if anybody out there right now or anybody here feels that you want to go home, or if you maybe have drank, you know what I mean? Like, you can see where this question is going, right? Like phrasing it in a way where it's out there. It's not, it plants a seed in the person's head who can say, I've been given permission by the organizers to bow out if I need to, rather than feeling the peer pressure of going.
Totally. Martine, it's one of the things, I think there's the personal behavior, and then there's also the really basic tools and tactics that, to your point, event organizers can provide, like flights of bottles of water on the way out, like more personal spittoons at a tasting, things that are visual triggers that are a moderating source or a mechanism for you to then choose. Right. So we've all walked around with the individual red Solo cup at a tasting, not because it looks cool, but because it's a really functional asset to have when you're trying to taste through a regional tasting of 100 odd wines. Coming back to the water comment, there's never enough water. We know alcohol dehydrates us. There's never enough serviceable, accessible, visible sources of really good water that we want to drink. There's often that catering, ballroom water provision, but, how often do we see that? And then there is that leadership demand from a cultural point of view for our industry to say, we take this issue seriously because we want to take care of you, because you bring value to us. So we want to recognize that and be sure that we're taking care of you to that bigger, because we want you to be well for the long term. And this is something I think that we should have an industry that thrives, that is in this for the long term, without, sacrificing personal health or physical ability or relationships or family time because of, the impact of maybe something that we as an industry could have helped to support them through. Laura, what have you seen? Yeah.
Well, so I'm wondering, have you ever read the book, The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker? Have any of you read this?
No. I need to.
No, I have not.
So I'm about 3/4 of the way through, and it is so wonderful. So Priya Parker is the author, and she breaks down why we gather and, explores different ways that we gather, to celebrate, to meet, to plan, all of these different ways. But something that she writes about is the host's responsibility for setting the rules of the gathering and protecting the guests in a, what did she call it? In a generous, authoritative way. And as we have this conversation, I'm thinking a lot about that, of when we host events, when we host tastings, when we, are facilitators at wine dinners or spirits dinners or whatever that looks like, that it's also, from a leadership standpoint, it's our responsibility, Martine, to your point, to set those rules, to provide permission of, like, you don't have to drink this, you don't have to finish this, and taking conscious and thoughtful steps and actions and measures to ensure that people are safe. And I mean, that's also an extension of of really solid hospitality, you know? I say it a lot that I think that the future of our industry really lies at the heart of what hospitality truly is. And that's an example of it. Like highly, highly, highly recommend that book. And in terms of what future building looks like and imagining what this industry can look like moving forward, you know, it starts with us thinking, what can we do to better protect not just ourselves, but each other?
I want to end this on on this hopeful note. Thank you so much for your thoughts, Laura and Rebecca. We're running out of time here, so it's time to move on to our dessert course. Martine, what did you bring for dessert?
You know, I pre-recording, I referenced this more than once about this this spicy Indian curry that I had, which is absolutely delicious. But what I didn't mention, and I'm happy to bring it up now, this is from that company that sends you. It's called Huel, Huel. I'm
Haven't
not.
heard of it.
I'm not plugging them in any. I don't care. I'm not, there's no money here. I just enjoyed. They sent basically what it amounts to, this hot and spicy, protein laden, gluten free, vegan, organic. I mean, the list goes on, right? All the tick boxes that Portlandia would be proud of, right, Catherine?
Woohoo!
But
Yeah.
it was a flavorless, spicy Indian curry. It was delicious, and it was hot. So Huel, hot and spicy. You add water, you add 2 scoops, and it tastes legit. And I just wanted to throw that out there for those busy professionals who don't make as much time for what?
When you're at the office like you are,
Yeah.
after, late after hours, all of us who work late.
The irony of this of balanced lifestyle is that I sometimes don't lead it. That's probably why I was looking forward to this session so much. But yeah, this you whip it up, add boiling water, and Huel spicy Indian curry soup is incredible. There you have it.
Good to know. Laura, did you bring a dessert item, something fun to share with our listeners?
Well, it might be the bottle of Jules Taylor Sauvignon Blanc in my refrigerator.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of like grapefruit notes in that to remind me of my beautiful shared moment of tasting the most beautiful spirit.
This episode is not sponsored by Malort.
It is not Jules Taylor. But yeah, that's I will absolutely enjoy that.
Love that. How about you, Rebecca? Did you bring some dessert for us to think about, chew on?
I brought Martine, I feel like I might have brought this for you, but there's a great digestive tea that I'm loving from Ahmad tea, yeah? And it's
yes.
It's licorice, fennel, and mint. And digestion's my biggest thing. If I think about anything that gets me upset, it's my digestion. And so yeah, it's an English tea company. It comes in a bag. It's widely available. AHMAD tea, and it's really easy to remember because it's just called Digest, and it's a blend.
Sorry,
AHMAD.
Ahmad.
Yeah, Ahmad tea.
Ahmad tea. Okay, yeah.
And when I'm home, I drink loose leaf. But the beautiful thing about these are tea bags, and you can throw. I've got any number of 10 to 20 to 50 tea bags in my suitcase when I'm traveling, and I love it. It's a winner. So there you go, Martine. I'll send you some.
You can import. I wish we could transport it directly from from you to me in some sort of futuristic instant transport system.
It'll help with your Indian curry, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, my dessert is for that next plane ride to a wine region on one of those trips we're talking about on this episode. It's a book. It's called The Vineyard. It's a novel by Maria Dueñas. And she also wrote another novel called The Time in Between that sold really well. So you may have heard of her before. But this is a novel. It's actually not really about a vineyard, but a vineyard in Jerez does play a role in it, and it's really fun to read descriptions of Jerez de la Frontera in the 19th century. And there's also a lady wine merchant character who is quite intriguing and quite fun. So if you're looking for a quick, fun read that's got some history, check it out, The Vineyard by Maria Dueñas. And that's it. Thank you so much, fabulous panelists. You can find Rebecca Hopkins online at abalancedglass.com. Thank you, Rebecca. And you can find Laura Louise Green online at healthypour.org. Thanks for being here, Laura. And co-host Martin Reyes is at reyeswinegroup.com. And you can find me, Catherine Cole, at catherinecole.com, or of course, thefourtop.org. And hey, everyone, we want to hear how you are doing mentally, physically, and emotionally. So please visit thefourtop.org. You can find our social media handles there and tweet at us, message us. And please subscribe to The Four Top on your favorite podcast app and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts so that others can find the pod. And that's it. So signing out from the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon. As always, I'm in my kid's closet, also known as my recording studio. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much for joining us.
This has been the Four Top Podcast. Catherine Cole is our executive producer, Izzy Kramer is our senior producer, and I'm Keelan King, sound supervisor. We are also assisted by audio editor, Michelle Richards, our production assistant, Rachel Grossman, and our social media assistants, Lex Rule and Nick Toole. Please visit our website, thefourtop.org, to learn more about us, listen to back episodes, reach out to us on social media, and purchase books written by our amazing panelists. And if you have not already subscribed to The Four Top on iTunes, NPR One, or Spotify, please do so and leave us a rating. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you still there? Oh, well, if you're still listening, then I need to tell you something. I need to tell you about the fabulous swag over at sparklingwineanytime.com. Sparkling Wine Anytime is, of course, your favorite new book about all things bubbly, but it is also a wonderful website designed by our team, Lex and Rachel. And we have gifts and goodies galore for you. We have sparkling wine-themed beach towels, teas, cocktail napkins, fancy wine flasks, adorable tote bags, and more. And guess what? Your purchase will help to support a favorite cause of ours, Ahivoy, that's AHIVOY, check it out, which provides education and career training to vineyard stewards in the Willamette Valley. So it's a win-win for everyone, and who doesn't love sparkling wine anytime? Please head to sparklingwineanytime.com. We would love to see you there. Thanks. We love you all. You're wonderful. Kiss, kiss.